Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, scholars and dignitaries, welcome to another episode. Welcome to my world. Hello, friends. So, as you know, most politicians campaign around one promise, one big promise. No new taxes. And it's for an obvious reason. Taxation hurts the average family. The vast majority of people have limited means. Many are on a fixed income, and 60% of society lives one paycheck to another with little or nothing in a savings account or for those unexpected emergencies. And so any increase in taxes, however seemingly small, can translate into a very real and significant burden on the average taxpayer. So that's a serious pledge, and one that drives many voters to support them. I've sat at many local meetings at the city and county level and had discussions and seen the negative power of taxes as they impact upon the middle class. And of course, the same is true at the state and national levels. So here comes Joe Biden, and of course the federal government is in a total freefall spending mode. It seems like the Democrats are spending like drunken sailors, like they're spending money even before they get it. Don't even get me started on their scheme to eliminate student loans. Currently, there is an outstanding $1.6 trillion in federal student loans, and according to Biden's plan for loan relief, it will cost taxpayers over $500 billion, which of course will be added to the federal debt, already standing at $32 trillion. Of course, the only other option is to increase taxes on all American families by $2,500 per family. In any event, it's easy to see through this, and to see that this is a ploy by the Democrats to buy the votes from recent college graduates. Oh, and to do this, the president is going to issue an executive directive rather than by going through Congress, which is the normal way to budget and control tax dollars. But the fact is that the executive branch simply doesn't have the power to tax and spend, and yet he's trying that. So this brings me to this point. When Joe Biden was running for president, he said time and again that, quote, any family making under $400,000 will pay no more taxes. He promised that. He also promised that he would reduce the federal deficit. And yet he just introduced a $6.7 trillion budget, the highest level of government spending ever. And yes, in his budget, he calls for 100 more border control agents on the southern border, a small response for such a great need, but also funding for another 87,000 IRS agents for more audits. This just isn't right, and this needs to be called out. Oh, and again, remember that as a campaign promise, Biden said that no family that makes under $400,000 per year would have to pay more in taxes. Remember that. It was one of his key campaign promises, another promise that was broken. So here are two clips that I want you to see regarding what's really happening with the federal budget. And remember, mainstream media isn't reporting on this. So let's go to the hearings themselves to expose what's really happening.
2021, the Treasury released an analysis right here that states $80 billion in additional IRS funding would be used to increase the total headcount at IRS compared to 2021 by almost 87,000 employees over the next decade. Is that accurate? Is that correct?
The vast majority of those hires are to replace attrition, people who would be retiring. So
okay, so the attrition is about 12,000 personnel over the last 10 years.
Over 10 years, it's much larger than that.
Okay, the record reflects that the headcount decreased by 12,000 over the last decade. So that would leave us at 75,000 new personnel at IRS. So I just want the record to reflect that. Now, regarding the audits, and the chairman talked a bit about this, there's been confusion about the meaning of the directive that you cited in the letter last August and then repeated here today. So are you talking about the total number of audits, or are you talking about the proportion of audits on families and small businesses under $400,000?
I'm talking about the proportion of those small businesses and families.
Okay, so the proportion, I mean, just for the record, the proportion is 90%. So 90% of the new audits will be, according to the data, that we can expect up to 90% of new audits to be on those making less than $400,000.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Thank you,
Madam
Senator.
Secretary, isn't it a fact that the President's proposed budget for next fiscal year is $500 billion more than this fiscal year?
About that.
Isn't it a fact that since 2019 until today, I'm not including the extra $500 billion that y'all want to spend, since 2019 through today, U.S. population has increased 1.8%, and the federal government's budget is up 55%. Isn't that a fact?
Well, we had a pandemic.
Isn't that a fact, though? Are my
I'm
numbers
not,
right?
I don't know those numbers.
You don't know? You never looked at that?
I don't have those numbers in my head. I'm not disputing them.
Okay. Isn't it a fact that the President's proposed budget proposes $4.7 trillion in new taxes?
It does propose significant additional taxes, yes.
4.7 trillion?
Something like that, yes.
Okay. You talked about reducing deficit. Isn't it a fact that under President Biden's proposed budget, that gross debt will rise from $32.7 trillion at the close of this year to $51 trillion by 2033?
That's probably a fact.
So you haven't reduced the deficit, have you?
The deficit, the debt and deficits are reduced by the president's
How
budget.
can you go from $33 trillion to $51 trillion and call that a reduction in the deficit?
Because that's a calculation for which you need a baseline, and then you compare the budget and the deficits in debt in the budget with a baseline in which there are none of the changes either in revenues or in spending that are proposed in the budget.
Here's my baseline. At the end of this year, we project, people a lot smarter than me, probably not than you, but smarter than me, say that gross debt's $33 trillion. They say if the president's budget is implemented by 2033, it'll be $51 trillion.
The United States government increases spending every year, and much of that money is taken without justification and spent by politicians on non-essential services and pork barrel projects, again, to buy votes. And the fact is that they aren't going to stop as long as they can continue to get away with it. And by the way, tax increases are another element of inflation, slowly eating away at the limited dollars a worker earns. Meanwhile, the average worker, the middle-class taxpayer, continues to suffer, watching over a third of his earned income, his or her precious money, disappear in taxes and fees to the government. And this will only continue until we elect some people who will recognize that the tax and spend policy doesn't help anyone. Hey, be safe, be well, and may God bless you and this great country.